Good morning, I'm WaywornWyrm, and welcome to my channel. And welcome to The Stolen Lands Episode 3, The Thorn River Camp. The riders had to slow down while they picked their way through the various game trails as they headed toward the bandit camp through the dense forest of the Gnarl Marches. Suddenly, Petra, who was the lead rider at the moment, held her hand up for everyone to stop. Lucion looked up at the sky, or rather, the branches higher up, and realized they couldn't be near the camp yet. It was far too early in the afternoon. Dismounting his horse, he slowly walked up to Petra and motioned his confusion to her. She pointed ahead to a small clearing, and Lucion looked. In the clearing, ahead of them, were 5 river elk. There was a bull elk who was almost as tall as Lucion at its shoulders, and 4 female elk. Slowly, Lucion moved to the edge of the clearing to watch them, and over the next few minutes, his whole group joined him. They stood like that for what seemed like a long time as the elk fed on the shrubbery in the clearing, before eventually moving off. The party stood there for another minute or two in awe of what they had seen, before mounting their horses again and getting back to riding. Finally, they reached the marker the bandit at Oleg's had told them to look for, and knew they were close. Assuming he had been honest, that is. They dismounted their horses and tied them up slightly off the path as the moonlight sparkled off the Thorn River. Lucion and Petra both pulled out their bows and slowly moved closer to the watchtower that overlooked the river crossing. Loosing arrows almost simultaneously, they watched as both shot true, one hitting the guard in the chest, the second in his neck, and he collapsed without a sound. The group passed into the woods and worked toward the clearing that they knew the main camp set in. When they reached the outskirts of the camp, it was clear that the dead guard was spotted from the other watchtower, and the bandits were ready for an attack. Lucion obliged their desire for a fight. Drawing his sword, he rushed out with a yell toward the woman Cressel. She pulled out her hand axes, flourishing them and dropping into a guard stance. But what she did not expect was for Lucion to smash into her with a shield bash to knock away her guard and daze her for just long enough for his sword to slide through her. Her eyes went wide and searched the face less than an inch in front of her for a few seconds in confusion, before she dropped to the ground, sliding off the blade. Petra snuck around the side of the clearing, getting into a good position for the bandit in the closer watchtower, who was drawing a bow himself. Her arrow embedded itself into his chest, and he collapsed onto the railing of the tower. The other 2 bandits started to run away, trying to get away from Lucian's party. Tiber caught up with them and was able to just keep pace with them. Umbria planted her feet firmly and shot an unerring missile of magical force into the back of one of the 2 bandits, who fell forward for a second, before scrambling back to his feet and continued running. "Stop!" Lucian bellowed at the retreating forms, and then, to punctuate his words, he shot an arrow to whiz between the 2 and thud into a tree in front of them. They pulled up short, and Tiber escorted them back to camp. Once the 3 had made it back to the main camp, Lucian was pacing in front of the fire they had. The contingent here was once a dozen men, plus your leader. The 4, including the cloaked man, who went to Oleg's trading post, are dead. Your boss is dead. Your 2 watchmen are dead. There are 4 more somewhere out hunting, and then there are the 2 of you. You can either help us and go back to face banditry charges with the note that you repented, or you can refuse to help now and we'll execute you as unrepentant bandits. It's up to you. The men, held at the scruff of their necks by Tiber, watched this tall man, the scales on his armor glinting in the firework, pace like a predator barely contained from its prey. They were silent for a while before one of them sank to his knees. Please, please have mercy, he begged. I'll let you know whatever you want to know. Just mercy, please. Petra quickly ambled close to them, her bow put away and her swords in hand. Where is your loot? The man on his knees motioned over to the closer watchtower. Under there. His tone was resigned, and his companion, the one Umbria had hit, glared down at him. There's liquor there for the stag lord. I'd recommend you leave it. He'll become much more aggressive if his booze is kept away from him. With this camp taken out, this part of the Greenbelt should be fairly free of bandits for at least a while. Unless you take his booze, then they'll probably come back. Why don't you tell them everything? His companion spat. Lucian flashed a look first at the standing companion and then at Tiber. Tiber read the look correctly and smashed his hilt into the back of the man's head, just behind the ear, and the man crumpled to the ground. Go on, Lucian said, as if nothing had happened. The bandit on his knees looked in horror at his companion for a second, before nodding. The Stag Lord has a base in a tower on a hill between where the Skunk River and the Thorn River enter the lake called Tuskwater. Lucian nodded and then looked over as Petra came back. She got in close to the face of the remaining bandit. Where is it? She spat angrily. Where's what? The fear clear in his voice. The wedding ring. It must have been with the 2 bags those damn mites stole yesterday. They live under the old sycamore. They came in and just they took 2 of our bags. The wedding ring must have been in there if it's not by the watchtower. Who's getting it? No one. They just had some copper coins and some cheap trinkets. Cressel didn't think it was worth it to try and get them back. She told us to stay here. There was other more important things, especially today with getting the stuff from Oleg. We were going to get more. Those things weren't worth it. Angrily, Petra stalked away again. Lucian looked around his surroundings before nodding to himself, speaking to the bandit. You're quite lucky. You have helped us greatly in our quest, so you shall come back with us to Oleg's, to await trial in Rostov. Your companion, however, will not be so lucky. Petra, have you decided what's worth taking and what's worth leaving? Yes, sir, I most certainly have. Good, we'll pack it up. Tiber, string this other man up. He walked forward and grabbed the remaining bandit and slapped a pair of manacles on his wrist and began pulling him roughly back toward the horses. Umbria walked over to Petra. What are we keeping? She asked curiously. Well, plenty. Their swords and bows are worth something. She motioned to the dead bandits, then motioning over to the woman's body. And she has some good-looking axes we can keep. And there's always their armor. We didn't damage it too bad. And past that, there are some coins, some nice earrings, a couple of crates of furs and hides that I'm sure Oleg would love to buy back. Hell, they might not all be from him. So this might be even better for him. Umbria nodded, and she was glad for the horses. In fact, Lucion dragged the bandit all the way to the horses and collected them and brought them back, the bandit tied by rope to Lucian's saddle. Okay, let's load this all up and travel at least a couple hours back towards Oleg's. There's no telling when the bandits will return, and I'd rather be out of here before then. Tiber looked at the pile Petra created, partially by stripping the dead bodies and those of the living, and shook his head. He would comment if he didn't know how much this expedition was going to cost. Beyond even that, it was rumored that the 4 groups the Sword Lords had sent into the Stolen Land, including this expedition, were to set up kingdoms to serve as sort of a set of allied buffers between Roastland and the River Kingdoms, in the case that the tensions in Brevoy would flare up into civil war. With a sigh, he set about performing the final rites on these men and woman before he strung them up to serve as a warning to the other bandits when they came back. As he started pulling the 4th one in the air, he actively looked away and tried to ignore the jumping of the rope. With all the grisly work finished, the group set off back into the forest to leave the camp behind, at least for now. Soon they would have to start exploring the land in detail, not just traveling from point to point as they had been. Hopefully, the man stumbling behind them was correct about their tack, lowering banditry in the immediate area to next to nothing. Thank you so much for listening to the Stolen Lands 3, the Thorn River Camp. Tune in, hopefully Tuesday, for episode 4, Return to Oleg's, and tune in later today for my end of the week video. Thank you so much.